everybody. Welcome to the Hidden Gems podcast. This is the podcast once a week where we take a look at the streaming services and we encourage you to dig a little bit deeper and to find the hidden gems on that service that you can watch. And this is a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing it. And I'm film critic Rachel Wagner, and Ryan is here.
Hey, Rachel. So great to be back with you once again. Today is one of those days where I just would like to just disappear into this very comfortable hoodie I'm wearing. I'm like the opposite of Ice Cube. I had a bad day, but my day has improved. My day has improved exponentially because I am here with you now. And we're going to be talking about one of the more underrated streaming services out there in Amazon Prime. Because every time I go into Amazon Prime, I think to myself, man, I'm going to struggle to find some things. But then I was like, wow, they've actually got some good stuff in here. They've got most of the James Bond movies on there, except for the Craig ones. All of the Star Trek movies, for all CBS's talk about how they're going to be all Star Trek all the time. And yet here on Amazon Prime, I can watch all of Star Trek Original, Star Trek Next Gen, all of the movies. I mean, maybe with the exception of Discovery. But anyway, side road. Amazon Prime is really, really good.
Yeah, I think that the first time that we talked about them, I think this is our third time, I believe, covering Amazon. And we talked about how much good stuff there was, and there really, really is. And we're going to have a lot of fun talking about some of the hidden gems over there. And they have a lot of Christmas movies. They have like you said, James Bond. They have a lot of shows. The Marvelous Miss Maisel, for instance, very popular over there on Amazon Prime. So let us know your favorites on Amazon Prime. We'd love to talk about that. And so why don't you start us off and share your first pick?
So my first pick is a TV show. Well, it's a mini series actually. It's from 2014 and it is called The Making of the Mob Chicago. I believe in either the last Amazon episode or the one before, I recommended The Making of the Mob New York, and I said next time around I'd be recommending the sequel show, The Making of the Mob Chicago, and so that time has come. The Making of the Mob Chicago was produced by AMC, and this was around the time where they were just making some top shelf television. They had just wrapped up Breaking Bad, Walking Dead was still relatively hot, and they were doing some really, really good mini series as well, along with History Channel, but I'll talk about their series some other time. The Making of the Mob Chicago is a show that is exactly what it sounds like. It tells the story of how Al Capone basically used the Great Depression, not the Great Depression, Prohibition, I know my history, to take over the underground and the underbelly of Chicago and basically turn it into his own personal playground. I am fascinated by mob history. It's every time I think to myself, oh, they can't surprise me, they still surprise me again. It's one of those things where it's endlessly fascinating. Like even a kind of a subpar mob documentary or a mob drama is still just endlessly entertaining. And in this show is no different. It mixes talking heads with actual acting and people actually playing Capone and his cronies. And in any other case, it would be like, okay, you got to make a decision. Like you got to go with either the acting part or just like a straight up documentary, but they make it work. And overall, it's just a very well acted show. I really have no idea how Al Capone sounded in real life, and I don't think we ever will. But the guy who played him was about as close as we'll probably ever get. And like I said, this show is just fascinating. It's only like 8 episodes, and they don't go more than 45 minutes, so it's a relatively quick watch. And yeah, mob history is just really, really fascinating stuff, at least for me.
Yeah. I think I might have actually seen at least the one on Al Capone. And it's interesting. I think he had a kind of a more high-pitched voice.
Interesting.
Yeah, as I recall. I could be wrong about that. It's been a while. But yeah, I think it's interesting to kind of hear about the behind the scenes of almost anything. Even people that are not very good people. It's interesting to hear about how they ended up where they are and how it all worked, and figure out how that whole organization worked and how it was all kind of taken down is also very interesting. And so, yeah, that's a good pick. That would be definitely worth a watch. So, my first pick is argumentably definitely not a hidden gem, but here I'll prove my case. Because it's hard to say that a show that has 40 seasons is a hidden gem, but I love the show Survivor. It's the whole reason I started podcasting was because I started listening to this podcast called Rob Has a Podcast, which is still going on and is really great. I had the honor to be on Rob Has a Podcast last year, which was so exciting for me, with Rob Sesternino. And he is a 2-time Survivor player. And he built up this amazing podcast from his apartment that he started with just him and his wife. And it's very inspirational to me. And I love the show. And I think the thing that's great about the show is that every single season is different. Every single win is different. The strategy is always different, and it's just fascinating to watch. And these people coexist together while also playing the game and the strategy. And I really love it. And I would say the reason why maybe it's a hidden gem is that some of these seasons are definitely hidden gems that even amongst the hardcore survivors are not as well watched and as well seen. So you could have a great time watching a season like Panama or Survivor. I love Survivor China. I think is a really, really good season. It's one of the only ones that's not on a beach, which makes it kind of interesting. And I just think it had a great group of people with James and with Amanda and Todd. His win is really, really, really good. And it's probably one of the best tribal councils they ever had. And a really good performance. And you can watch seasons 1, 3, 12 through 28 on Amazon Prime. And they also now just added it to Netflix, but I think it's only 2 seasons on Netflix. So they also have season 28, which is Kagayan, which is my all-time favorite. And it's so entertaining. Tony is hilarious and really, really great. So I love the show. And yeah, I always talk about Survivor whenever I get a chance to. Have you ever watched it?
I tried, and at the time I was just like, it's not for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was an Amazing Race person, which I've actually recommended on another episode of when we
Yeah.
talk about Amazon. So don't feel too bad about recommending
No.
Survivor, because the Amazing Race has been around for just as long as Survivor, because Survivor premiered in 2000 and Amazing Race premiered in 2001. So they're like neck and neck with each other, and
Yeah.
they're still going.
And I think that the Amazing Race used to have more strategy because they used to be able to, I'm going to pick this flight over this flight, or I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to find this other way to get there. And so there would be all people on all different flights and other things. And now that doesn't really happen hardly at all. And there's just the one flight, and pretty much everybody gets on that flight. And so it's I think it's not it's entertaining on a social level, and it's fun on a let's look at all these places level. But as far as strategy and game theory, which is something that Survivor's really strong about, there's also Big Brother, and Big Brother is interesting, the social dynamics of it, but it's so long and so time intensive. Whereas Survivor is just they just are filming for 1 month, whereas the Big Brothers the whole entire summer, and you have 3 episodes a week, and it's just too much. It's too much of a time investment, and they have the live feeds, and so they all have their appeal though, and are interesting and fun, and it's nice to see how different people play the games, I think. So
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like CBS was like the king of like these like are these
games.
technically game shows?
Yeah. And in the last season of Survivor, because they had season 40 was all winter season, it was amazing. I loved it. And they had $2 million prize, which is the largest of any game show ever to give.
Wow, it's like
Yeah.
CBS for like a really long time was like the king of these reality game shows. You know, they had Survivor, Amazing Race, they had Fear Factor with Joe
Mm-hmm.
Rogan, they had just they had Undercover Boss, which I think is underrated, and so yeah, through
Mm-hmm.
like the late 2000s, early 2010s, they were like tier one in terms of like these reality game shows. Or well,
Yeah.
Undercover Boss isn't a game show; it's more of a reality show. But
Yeah.
I'm sure you
Yeah.
get my point.
Yeah. And I really like the ones that involve a certain degree of strategy and gameplay about them. I think that's interesting. But what's your next pick?
So my next pick is a movie from 2012, and it is called Safe. This stars Jason Statham, and I have a feeling I may have turned some of you off already. Stay with me. This movie's actually pretty good. It tells a story of a guy named Luke Wright, played by Statham, who has pretty much lost everything. He basically refuses to take a fall in a MMA fight, and so he's basically hunted by the Russian mob, and pretty much everywhere he goes, death follows him. And he has no friends really, so it's just rough times for him. But then, through a coincidence, he meets this little Chinese girl who has the unique ability to memorize any number that you give her. So it could be like the longest, most complicated number you could possibly come up with, and she could be like, I could repeat it back to you, but it would be long and boring. So she's really, really good at numbers. And the number that she has memorized in the case of this movie is the safe combination to pretty much the life savings of the Chinese mob, the Russian mob, and the corrupt cops that they have bought. And she has gotten away from them and is now in the hands of Luke Wright. And it's basically an escort mission to get this little girl from point A to point B and keep all of the bad people far away. Jason Statham movies kind of get like looked down upon by most people, I feel, and there's some truth to that, but he actually has some pretty good movies. There's this one movie called The Bank Job that was really good. I love him in all the Fast and Furious movies, but I love those movies wholeheartedly anyway, so I mean, I guess I'm a little biased there, but I think I don't want to say he's like a great actor or anything, but I think he's charismatic. He's got energy. He commits fully to everything that he is in, and I think that's very commendable. And I think Safe is one of his very best performances. You feel just the dread that he feels of pretty much having nothing and just being crapped upon by a world that doesn't care about you. And then as soon as he finds this little girl and just tries to protect her, it's like a switch flips, and he is like, all right, I gotta protect her at all cost. And there's just there's just a lot to like about this movie. There's some really, really good action, some badly filmed action, I will admit. There's a part where Statham is on top of a moving subway train. That's really the one moment of the movie where I check out. Like it goes from like John Wick to Safe with Keanu Reeves, and then back to John Wick again. But outside of that, though, I think this is a very underrated action movie. Uh, like I said, Statham's really good in it. There's a lot of good fight scenes in there. There's a lot of pretty solid one-liners in there. Like there's this one where he has a gun pointed to a guy, a Russian guy, and one of the guys is like, "Didn't you used to be a garbage man?" And Statham's like, "You were wrong. I didn't collect the trash. I disposed of it and shot him in the head. It's badass in the movie, I promise.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the movie's good.
That sounds fun. That sounds like a fun action movie. Well, very good. So we're going to take a hard left, as you like to say, for my next one. And we're going to talk about the Christmas contract. Like they said, oh, they have a lot of Christmas movies on Amazon Prime and really fun ones. Not that many Hallmark ones. Most of them are Lifetime. And this is Lifetime. And it's called The Christmas Contract. And it's about this woman. She's planning on taking her boyfriend up to meet her parents, and she lives in, like, I think it's Louisiana. Anyway, they have like gumbo and other things like that there, and it's a little bit of a warm setting that you typically don't have in these movies, these Hallmark or Lifetime movies. And then her boyfriend dumps her, so she's stuck without her boyfriend, and she doesn't want to be single at the Christmas events again. And so she makes this deal with this guy that she knows. They sign this Christmas contract that he'll pretend to be her boyfriend. And so they go to their house in Louisiana, and all kinds of hijinks ensue. And it's Hillary Burton and Robert Buckley. And I love both of them so much. I think they have really nice chemistry. They were in One Tree Hill together, so they'd worked together in the past. And uh, this is just really funny and sweet. And if you like these kind of rom-coms, then you'll enjoy it for sure.
The movie kind of sounds like that Netflix movie Holiday, where it's like the two people are make a contract where they'll be each other's
Yeah,
mates for various holidays.
but this is definitely like PG or G, and Holiday is an R-rated film. So
So one's for kids, one's for adults.
yeah, exactly. So I think if you want kind of a silly, over the top, enjoyable Christmas rom com, The Christmas Contract's a lot of fun. So what do you have next?
So my next choice, and this may be walking a bit of a tightrope because this is a Star Trek movie, and I know you're screaming at your screens right now, Ryan. Star Trek is one of the biggest franchises ever. What are you doing? Hear me out. The common logic when it comes to the Star Trek movies is that the odd number movies are bad and the even number movies are good. Well, I'm going to make a defense for Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this movie had the unfortunate task of following up easily the best Star Trek movie ever made, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. I just recently watched that movie for the first time, and it was unbelievably good.
Yeah.
So Star Trek 3 basically had to climb Mount Everest to try and be half as good as Wrath of Khan. And I think in that regard, people do treat it a little unfairly because I watched this for the first time recently and I enjoyed it just as much as I did Wrath of Khan. Is it as good as Wrath of Khan? No, I don't think so, but I think there's more than enough to enjoy it. I think this movie has an incredibly compelling story. Uh, it works around the whole Spock death thing in a way that at first you're like, what? But then when you put two and two together, you're like, okay, it's starting to. It's like jazz. You just roll with it. William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy and the entire original cast are in here. Leonard Nimoy actually directed this movie, and he also directed A Voyage Home, just for all you trivia nerds out there. And of course, this cast is all just fantastic. Honestly, one of my favorite sequences of the movie is when, basically, just for context's sake, uh, then Admiral Kirk is basically relieved of his command of the Enterprise. And so he tries to get it back by staging this Ocean's 11 level operation to try and get him, McCoy, Uhura, and Sulu onto the Enterprise. And I'm not doing it justice. It's such a fun sequence, but Sulu has a one-liner at the end that is just that's just absolutely amazing. This guard basically calls him Tiny, and then as they're all getting away in the elevator, he's like, "Don't call me Tiny." Like that's just great delivery by George Takei. Uh, Again, I do understand why people wouldn't like Star Trek 3, but I really dug it. It's my father's favorite Star Trek movie, and it's up there among mine. I think it's underrated and it's misunderstood.
Mhm. I do agree with you that I think it is underrated. I like it quite a bit. In fact, I'm not a huge fan of the fourth film, which other people love it. It's so silly that it was kind of shocking to me.
So
To
wait, you mean to say that Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock going back in time to save the whales isn't silly?
I,
No.
yeah, it's a little much for me. And I was so surprised because I was just watching them not realizing kind of that it was going to happen. And so I go from watching 3 to then 4 and I was just like, "What? This is so silly." Um but yeah, I mean, there's some stuff with uh the Kirstie Alley's character, and that she has.
Actually, Kirstie Alley was Savick in 2 only. It was played by a different actress in 3. Robin Curtis, that's her name.
Oh, okay, yeah. So what what she has to do in order to bring Spock back to life is a little bit strange. um, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think this is definitely underrated, and I liked it. I mean, I don't like it as much as Wrath of Khan, because Wrath of Khan is such a good, clean sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
It's
Trying
it's
trying to replicate the quality of Star Trek to The Wrath of Khan is a Herculean task, whether it's in the Star Trek universe or not. But I
mhm,
think three just kind of suffered due to just expectations alone.
yeah.
And to all of you who haven't seen this movie in a very long time, I do recommend you check it out again. At least for the Christopher Lloyd performance as the lead Klingon.
Yeah, he is funny. He hams it up.
He has the time of his life. Go! Get out of there! And then the final battle at the end where Kirk just throws him off the cliff and he's like, I have had enough of you. It's it's such a Kirk line, and it's fantastic.
I think the most underrated Star Trek though is Undiscovered Country, the sixth one. I think is underrated. I with Christopher Plummer as your bad guy in that one, and I really like that one a lot. And I feel like you never hear it getting talked about. But all right, very good choice. So my next choice is an animated film, and it was on my list of my favorite DreamWorks animated films that we did for Movie Nerds Club this month. And it was, or last month, I should say. And it was Megamind. And I just think Megamind is really funny. It basically does all the things Despicable Me does, but I think it does it better. I think it's funnier. I think the animation's better. I like the whole arc of Brad Pitt's character, I think is funny, as this sort of archetypal hero. And then you have Megamind, who is the villain, but is he the villain? And it's, I don't know, I really enjoy it.
Yeah, Megamind is really underrated. It's got one of my favorite Will Ferrell performances. Really
Mm-hmm.
good performance from Brad Pitt, and it's a very interesting story too. It kind of explores the question of what happens if the villain wins. What if all of a sudden one day the Joker gets Batman at the end of the day, or
Mm-hmm.
what happens if Lex Luthor were to destroy Superman, and it answers the question of it's like one needs the other, just like they work like a yin yang relationship. They're different, but it's like the whole opposites attract kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. All right, what's your next pick?
So my next pick, and kind of keeping with an accidental double feature of underrated entries in famous franchises, I'm going to be talking about On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This is notorious among the James Bond canon as the only Bond movie to star George Lazenby. This this would be his only time in the role until it would go back to Sean Connery, may he rest in peace, for one movie, and then on to Roger Moore. So if like Sean Connery and Roger Moore were like two Oreo cookies, then George Lazenby would be the cream in the middle. And in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, James Bond plays, well, let me back that up. George Lazenby plays James Bond, and Bond is after Spectre yet again and Blofeld, but at the same time, he falls in love with a mob boss's daughter. And what I like about this movie is that James Bond is notorious for his womanizing. It's like he wears a tuxedo, drives an Aston Martin, drinks a vodka martini, shaken not stirred, and he woos women. That's like his four cornerstones of like his character in a nutshell. But in this, he actually tries to pursue an actual relationship and tries to know this woman and tries to get along with her. I liked that. I thought it was a very nice departure that we wouldn't see until Casino Royale with Bond and Vesper Lynd, played brilliantly by Eva Green, by the way. The woman is named Tracy, and she's played by Diana Rigg, who would have a long and lengthy career. She's probably, her most recent work is she was, and I'm going to try and get this name right, Olenna Tyrell in Game of Thrones. And she was also Emma Peel in The Avengers. No, not the MCU Avengers, The Avengers, the British spy television show. So she's still acting to this day. She was actually in the Black Narcissus show for Peacock. So, or wait, was it Peacock?
But I think she actually just passed away.
Let me check.
Just
yes,
barely.
September 10th. So yes, she did. May she rest in peace.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, she has had a long and storied career, and Blofeld in this is played by Telly Savalas, who would then eventually become Kojak in the Kojak television show. So a lot of actors in here who would go on to do much bigger and better things. But On Her Majesty's Secret Service is one of those Bond movies that doesn't get talked about that often, and I think it should, just for the dynamic between Bond and Tracy alone. It also has really good action, especially this particular scene near the opening on a beach. I won't go any further than that. And the ending is legitimately heartbreaking. I will not spoil it, but it's one of the best Bond endings ever, in that it's so effective in what it tries to convey, and it's a rough ending, but it's still a chef's kiss.
Cool. I actually haven't seen that one. There's actually a lot of the Bonds that I haven't seen, especially the older Bonds. That I was actually thinking about that come whenever we finally get to see the new one, that we should do like a best and worst of James Bond. That would be fun.
I would be down for that.
Yeah, that would be fun. Anyway, my next pick is admittedly maybe a little bit of a stretch as a hidden gem because it was very highly praised and won Oscars and all those kind of things when it came out. But that was 1987, and a lot of people don't know movies from the 80s, and this is Broadcast News. And this is such a great script, a great movie. It is directed and written by James L. Brooks, who is just such an incredible talent, who was such incredible talent. He's responsible for shows like the Mary Tyler Moore Show and all of those spin-offs. He is one of the creators of The Simpsons. He's just an incredible mind. And in this movie, you have William Hurt playing sort of the flashy anchor, the flashy reporter. And then you have Albert Brooks, who is kind of your not flashy but talented guy. And then you have Holly Hunter, who's the producer of this news program. And basically, like, both men are kind of in love with Holly Hunter's character. And the Albert Brooks character has to kind of see her sort of be won over by this kind of arrogant, rude guy, played by William and William Hurt, and you just feel for his character so much. But then he's also a bit of a sad sack in certain ways, but so he's a pretty well-rounded character. Like, you like him and you don't like him, which is what you kind of want. And he there's some great writing with him, and Holly Hunter's really great in it. It was nominated for a bunch of Oscars, but it was really good. And so if you haven't seen it, you should definitely watch it. It's a really good movie.
Yeah, I was actually in the library the other day and I saw this DVD. It was the Criterion DVD, and I picked it
Mm-hmm.
up and I was like, should I watch this? And then I ended up putting it back. So I was literally like this close to checking it out. So
Mm-hmm.
but now with that in mind, I'll definitely have to pull the trigger and check it out.
Yeah. And it's just good acting, good writing. And so, yeah, you have to let me know what you think if you check it out. So what's your next pick?
So my final pick is from 1952, and it is one of my favorite John Wayne performances. It is called The Quiet Man. This, like I said, this was released in 1952. It was directed by John Ford, one of the greatest of all time, in my opinion. He directed The Searchers, he directed Stagecoach, directed The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, and The Grapes of Wrath. He had a long and lengthy career, especially with John Wayne. The Johns, the John and John connection. I just literally just thought about that. But anyway, The Quiet Man is not a western, it's about a man who is a former American boxer. He is now retired and basically is content on living out the rest of his days in a farm on the Irish countryside. But then he falls in love with a woman named Mary Kate, played by Maureen O'Hara, who had a long and lengthy career, especially in movies like The Miracle on 34th Street, the original. Uh, I remember watching this movie, especially in preparation for when I took my trip to Ireland, and watching this, I was like, wow, Ireland is so beautiful. And yeah, the movie didn't do it justice, but this movie is definitely underrated in John Wayne's canon. I think people know him more for his roles in Searchers and Stagecoach and all that, and that's an awesome legacy to have. But in the rare instances where John Wayne did slow down and wasn't like the "fill your hand, USOB," and like not like
Yeah.
doing his shtick, he was actually quite underrated as an actor and could more than carry his own. The chemistry that he has between him and Maureen O'Hara
Yeah.
is great. They have many great scenes with each other, and what I like about it is that their chemistry is so good that when they do have their occasional rough patches, you have a feeling that they're going to work it out, and they do, and it's just awesome.
Yeah.
The Quiet Man is especially underrated in terms of John Wayne, John Ford, and just them in general, because around like the early to mid 1950s, that was like John Wayne at like the height of his powers. So if you haven't seen this movie, I couldn't recommend it enough.
Yeah, it's really good. And you get to see one of the most famous kisses in all of movies, which is really fun. In fact, later on in E.T., you'd see that same kiss in E.T. in the famous scene where they're watching, E.T.'s watching The Quiet Man, and Elliot kisses the girl at school,
Oh,
just like in.
I completely forgot about that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So it's a really good movie. I enjoy it very much. So next, for my last pick, I have The Secret Life of Bees, and this is an adaptation of a book that I really enjoyed. That was a big popular book club book, The Secret Life of Bees by Sumunk Kidd, and it's adapted by Gina Prince Bythewood, and you talked about one of her movies, Beyond the Lights, I think either last week or the week before, not too long ago, Beyond the Lights. And so she does a really good job of taking scenes that could be kind of cliche and making them feel real and authentic. And we kind of talk, sometimes you have the white savior trope Well, in this case, you actually have in here, you have a family of Black sisters that take in a young white girl that's being abused by her father, and kind of what happens in their story. And I really like it. I think it's really good. It has Queen Latifah in it, who I always like. It's got Dakota Fanning as the young girl, Jennifer Hudson, Alicia Keys, and they're all doing a good job with their performances. And so yeah, I like it. I think it's a good movie. They're beekeepers, that's why it's called Secret Life of Bees.
Yeah, this movie came out around the time when I was like, chick flick, I was very dumb like that. And I remember my mom really liking it, and so I never really gave it the time of day. But I do really want to go back to it because it feels like it's a really good story. I mean, just the singing talent between Alicia Keys and Jennifer Hudson alone, that's like that's
Huge.
like that's huge in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and people should check it out. So there we go. We did it. Very good. So let us know if you have seen any of these films, what you think of them, and what do you think are some fun stuff to be watching on Amazon Prime right now. Let us know in the comments section or on Twitter. We'd love to have your thoughts. And Ryan, where can people find you?
They can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at RyanCam20. Then there's, of course, my YouTube channel, just simply Ryan Cam. A lot of content coming up this week. Rachel and I are recording this on a Tuesday, which means my video for It Happened One Night dropped yesterday on Monday. On Wednesday, my video for A Streetcar Named Desire, a part of the AFI project I forgot to mention. A Streetcar Named Desire, that'll be dropping on Wednesday. And then on Friday, my video for the Hitchcock classic Rear Window will be dropping. And then on Saturday, y'all are getting a double shot because I'll be reviewing episodes 5 and 6 of The Mandalorian. And then later on, I'll be dropping my installment of the Movie Nerds Club, which will be top 5 female-led action movies. And that's going to be a good time. So if you all haven't subscribed to me, please do. I ask you humbly. I put a lot of time into the channel. I'm very proud of it. So if you haven't checked me out, give me a chance.
Definitely, you all should. It's really good stuff over there. And yeah, and you can find me here at Rachel's Reviews all over social media and on iTunes and also at the Hallmarkies podcast. And if you haven't been checking out those, we've got tons of good interviews, including where I interviewed Robert Buckley, who I talked about earlier in the episode. So check that out. It's a lot of fun. And then also we have our Patron group, which we are having live watch along coming up next week. And so you don't want to miss that. And it's only $2 a month to join. Also have our merch store, which has lots of festive new designs. So check that out. We'd really appreciate it. And thanks again, everybody. And we'll talk to y'all later. Bye, everyone.